Good. I heard some of the whispers when you watched me come up here. I heard some of you kind of talking a little bit about me, and I could hear and see it in your lips what you were saying, and I heard it on a regular basis. It's something I've become used to over time. That guy's an athlete. I hear it on a regular basis whenever I walk on stage. It's super appropriate. I've just kind of gotten used to it. So thanks for that. I have been working out a little bit. And I started my athletic career at a young age. It was third grade, in fact, while the rest of the cool kids were out playing football and soccer. I was over on the playground, and we were playing an amazing game of freeze tag. And that's a really great way to work out. It really is. And we were running around, and you know how freeze tag works. You're running, and so it tags you frozen, and you stand there frozen. And you want to play the game again. That's part of the fun of freeze tag. So you're like, hey, come on, unfreeze me. And then someone comes over and goes, unfrozen, and you get to run and play the game again. Well, we would play every day after school, and I became pretty good at freeze tag. In fact, I was probably one of the best. I'm not trying to brag, but I actually am bragging. In fact, my senior year in high school, I lettered in freeze tag. Yeah. On the patch right here was just the shape of this person holding like this. Oh, it was just so great. And we were playing this amazing game, freeze tag. Well, the rest of the kids began to kind of get sick of playing freeze tag. I loved it. I kept on playing. So I'm in sixth grade now, playing against like the second graders. I'm taking them down like there's no tomorrow. I am really good at freeze tag. And we decided to try to advance the game a little bit. So instead of playing just, in the sand or on the grass, we went over to the playground. Back then, we had no safety concerns whatsoever. And we didn't care. It was a wooden platform. And it was just really great. And I remember I was standing there and I was playing, again, the tallest kid there playing, and someone went to tag me, frozen. And I tried to jump back and I lost my balance. And I came flying backwards and I hit the back of my head on this big wooden post. And the momentum of me throwing myself backwards was so strong that it flipped me over, and I literally hit the front of my head on a separate wood post. Yeah, thanks for feeling my pain. And I was brought to the hospital. I was there for 4 to 5 days. It was my first concussion. But they didn't know what to do back then. In fact, they just basically said you had your bell rung. That's what they would say. And I would say twice. And they allowed me to go back to school really pretty quickly after. Now, the challenge with me back in school was I wasn't a very good student. I didn't know then what I know now, that I had a pretty severe learning disability, but back then I just thought I was falling farther and farther behind. Well, when you add a concussion, actually two, I'm so sorry, 2 concussions to this person with this learning disability, that's not a very good spot for your academic performance. In 7th grade, you could watch my grades begin to plummet. So this was, again, 6th grade concussion, 7th grade, grades are beginning to plummet, not at a good spot, and I'm feeling horribly insecure about who I was. I also was 5'4" at that point and feeling just really insecure about my body image. I went from 5'4" to 6 feet in 1 year. And my knees are really bad still. And it was a hard thing. But I remember I was falling farther and far behind. I was becoming more and more quiet. And then something really kind of neat happened. Miss Horseman, my favorite teacher. She was walking around and she looked down and she said, Tom, you are an incredible writer. Have you ever considered joining the Writers Club? I thought, the Writers Club? That sounds incredible. And she said, in fact, I have an idea. I'd like to have you be president of the Writers Club. I said, the president of the Writers Club? This is the greatest day ever. And I said, how many members are in the Writers Club? And she said, you're the first. I said, I'm the first and the president? This is the greatest day ever. And I remember, I worked for the Gallup organization. One of the polls we did is we asked people this question: who's made the biggest impact on your life? And we asked people to remember that person. And we asked junior hires and senior hires and college students and CEOs of companies, and we asked them to see if they could remember that person's name. And then the follow-up question is how is it that that person made such a big impact on your life? And no matter if it was a 6th grader, or a 70-year-old, or a CEO of a company, there was a recurring pattern of an answer. And they would say the person's name, and they would say, why did that person make such a big impact in your life? And they would say, because they cared about me. They cared. And if we all stop and pause right now, we could think about the people that have come before us in life that have cared about us, that have asked us the right questions, the authentic questions, allowed us to be president of the Writers Club. And Miss Horseman cared about me. But the problem was I didn't have many other teachers like Miss Horseman, so she did the best she could to get me caught up. But the problem was my grades continued to kind of suffer. I was maybe a C student on a good day. So when you are struggling academically in a high-performing high school, you do it the best you can with what you have, and I became the class clown. I was very gifted. I also lettered than that. And so the teachers either loved me or hated me. But then I figured out that if I not only became the class clown, but I began to join clubs and organizations and take on leadership roles, I began to get accolades for that. So if you watch my schedule, I was involved in everything possible. And somehow the admissions process was down when I applied to college, and I think they missed my GPA. And they accepted me based on this long resume of extracurricular activities. And I got there, and I began to do the same thing. Overly committed, overcommitted, doing everything I could, running 1,000 miles per hour. And then life continued on, and I began to do the same thing. If you ran a nonprofit, I would love to write you a check, even though if it damaged my financial well-being. And if you asked me to mentor you, I would love to mentor you, even though if that meant that I would pull away from the people that I really loved and cared for. Because I began to get recognition for all these parts of who I was, and it felt good, but I had no clue why I was doing it besides that simple fact. And life continued on, and I began to go faster. I was speaking on weekends. I was writing. I was doing everything possible to show you that I was successful. The newest shirts, a new car, anything possible to gain your respect, or at least what I thought was respect. But then life continues on like life does, and one day I was reliving my hockey career that I never had to begin with. But I was born in Minnesota, so we're born with skates on, so it just was the right thing to do. We are a suburb of Canada, and I was reliving my hockey career, and this person stuck their stick right in my skate blade. For those of you who don't know hockey, that is not cool. And I was flying through the air, and I landed once again on my head. That night, for some reason, I thought I had the flu, but it wasn't the flu. The next day, I flew to LA to go speak to 500 students at a leadership conference, and I found myself slurring words as I was speaking. I couldn't find my rental car in the parking lot. When I landed back at the airport, I couldn't find my own car. They had to drive me around the parking lot until I kind of recognized it. I said, I think that's it. It was a Monday. I called my doctor, and I said, something's wrong. He got me in to have an MRI that day. 4 days later, he had set up an appointment with a neurologist. I was on my way, and he called, and he said, Tom, have you been experiencing any type of ringing in your ear? I said, yes, of course, but everyone does. That's the norm of travel. And he said, have you been struggling at all with balance? I said, of course, but I've just been tired. I haven't been sleeping well. I don't remember my 4 dreams from the night before. And drop the mic right there. And I couldn't remember any of those things, and I thought it was just the norm. And he said, Tom, here's the reality. You do have a concussion, and we need to take care of that, and I'm concerned about that. But even more so is we found what is a Gallup ball-sized brain tumor. And at that point, life felt frozen all over again. I walked into my neurology appointment literally as I was hanging up the phone. And I sat down in the waiting room, and I began to cry. I was so scared. And no one took care of me. There was no Miss Horseman there in the room. And I walked in, and the doctor, bless his heart, knew a lot about the brain, but he didn't know a lot about me. And he said, Tom, this Gallup ball-sized brain tumor, we need to take care of it right away. Here's your 2 options. This is going this fast. Cranial surgery, you're going to be out of work for about 6 months to a year. Or you could have what's called gamma knife radiation. We can shorten it to about 2 to 3 months. And what do you say? So I said, tell me about gamma knife. That sounds really cool. The Incredible Hulk, gamma knife radiation. And I thought this is going to be it. And he said, well, here's how the process works. We're going to attach a metal crown to your head, and we're going to screw it in. And it's going to feel painful and uncomfortable and hard for you, but we're going to numb as best we can. And then we're going to strap your head down to a table, and you're going to lay there for about 3 hours. and we're going to shoot you with radiation thousands of times. Please don't move. Of course, I don't want to move. And so on December 23rd, roughly 4 years ago, that's exactly what I did. And I remember they said, would you like music? And they put on the music, and it was like static. It was horrible. I was like, this is the worst experience ever, for 4 straight hours sitting there getting shot with radiation. But I had something really neat that day. I had another person that helped me become Unfrozen, this wonderful, blessed nurse who did life with me. And she said, I'm going to make a bet with you. Your doctor doesn't smile, no personality at all, but wicked smart. If you make that doctor smile and laugh today, that's your goal for the day. So I'm like, I'm in. I can do this. Class clown. Freeze tag. This is going to be perfect. And they went to go put this thing on your head so they could scope out where they're going to shoot the radiation. And the problem is my head is like an orange on a toothpick. I have a huge head. And they couldn't find one big enough. And I began to mock myself, and he went, ha, that was it. And I looked at her, and I was like, there we go. Woo, I won. And we went through the entire day, but the problem is 2 days later, as they drilled into my head to get these screws in and get this crown on, you began to swell up, and suddenly showers are painful. And I began to call in Tyler and Morgan, and I had to say, your dad can't see. I know it's Christmas and we're going to celebrate, but my swelling is just too much. I don't want to scare you. I'm going to wear some sunglasses today. The problem with having Gamma Knife is people will walk up and say, aren't you so glad to have that in your past? The problem it wasn't in my past at all, because it takes a year to figure out if it's working or not working. And over time, I began to feel some of the symptoms. My face would kind of become numb at times. There was a ringing in my ear, and then it increased over time. And eventually I started to lose my hearing. I began to feel crooked and my balance feeling off. And so I feel like I'm standing to the side right now, crooked, while you think, and I hope you see me standing upright. In time, I began to struggle waking up a lot in the middle of the night, and I finally spent 3 days at the doctor, and they found that the radiation had caused epilepsy. And then my mentor called me and said, Tom, I don't want to talk about your medical condition. I want to talk about you. What do you hope for in the future? The problem is a speaker, and as someone who's spent their entire lives trying to seek out others' approval, when you're told that you're going to have facial drop and you have epilepsy and you're going to lose your hearing, you lose sight of terms of who you are. Who am I? What do I value? And the answer was, I had no clue. Now, if I would have looked at Gallup's research around well-being, I would have started to see a lot more what the world was saying. When we look at this whole concept of well-being, we find that people would describe their lives as thriving, struggling, or suffering. I would say the last one is, instead of suffering, I'd say frozen. And we began to look around the world, polling thousands of people worldwide every single day to see how they would describe their own lives. We found about 24% of people in the world are thriving. There's a lot that go kind of back and forth given on the day, and about 12% of people are suffering. To give you some examples, there's Denmark compared to Zimbabwe. Makes sense. There's the United States compared to Minnesota, where I am. I can show whatever I want to show. And we began to look and try to understand how well-being impacted healthcare costs and how people viewed their lives and their values. I know that those of you in here, you wake up each day and you hopefully go do something you love to do. In fact, when we did research, one of my favorite research projects Gallup ever did is we looked at people that lived to the age of 100. And we tried to figure out, what do they have in common? And it was right here in this first bucket. They loved to wake up every day and go volunteer and go do something. They worked into their 80s and 90s. They just loved what they did. And I began to evaluate my own purpose, my own well-being, and who I was. What made a difference to me? Who did I want to be? And not who Gallup wanted me or the world wanted to be, but who did Tom want to be in the workplace? And I began to look at my friendships, and I wanted not just, as Brene Brown would say, not just authenticity, but I wanted vulnerability with people. And so I would do life with people that were willing to do life with me, including my friends Mark and other people that are here right now as well. And I began to try to look and say, what would it mean for me to live within my means? Because oftentimes we sort values and we claim values, but what happens if you can't afford them? Then don't do them. We have to be able to live within our means, and the amount of credit card debt in our country is taken up, and it scares me. And I began to look and say, I need to change the way I am eating and moving and sleeping, and that mattered to me. And finally, I began to say, I don't need recognition around my community, but I want to give back in ways that really feel personal to me. When I look at these areas, 70% of you are thriving in one of these areas, but only 7% are thriving in all five. What would it look like if you began to refocus your life and to live by the values that you not only claim, but you profess and live out? What would it look like if you could be a person that could make a difference every single day by understanding what matters to you at the core? The person that taught me that more than anyone else, his name was Brett with 2 T's. That's what he called himself. My name's Brett with 2 T's. Brett was born with what in our world we might say he was frozen. He was born with what's called Down syndrome. But Brett lived values in profound ways. He was loving and caring. When we brought him to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation to go serve and impact there, the Lakota Sioux knelt down and said, Brett, you are closest to the Great Spirit because of how simplistic and loving you are and how caring you are. One day at Home Depot, he was holding his dad's hand, walking into Home Depot, and Brett was talking, but my friend Paul really wasn't listening at all. He was just too busy. And finally he heard Brett, and Paul turned around and said, what is it, Brett, what? And he said, Dad, butterfly. And they began to look around, and there it was, this huge, amazing, beautiful butterfly in the middle of the parking lot. And Paul let go a little bit, and Brett took off running. What do? You take off after the butterfly with him. And they were running around chasing this beautiful butterfly, and they were reminded of a simple truth. Every single day, there is beauty that is surrounding us. For me, it took a golf ball-sized brain tumor to see that beauty and understand that beauty. We've had a day full of great ideas, great vision, great stories. But who do you want to be when you leave here today? What do you want your action to be? And what values do you want to live? We are blessed. There are butterflies everywhere. We just have to turn and look to see them. Thanks very much.